Hi, I'm Don Cantor, former co-director of JLIC at Johns Hopkins University and current director at the Richmond Jewish Learning Experience in Richmond, Virginia.
And I'm Alex Ozar, co-director of JLIC at Yale University, and this is the Torah JLIC podcast. JLIC supports thousands of young Jews in their college years and beyond, providing them with the nourishment they need to sustain an upward trajectory of Jewish commitment and growth as they enter the broader world. And the animating engine of that effort, that has always been and will always be Talmud Torah, high-level, richly meaningful, thoughtfully creative Torah learning, ambitiously attuned to the realities of where our students are. On the Torah JLIC podcast, we hope to share some of that Torah with you. Thanks for listening.
Today, we have Rav Uri Lorkis with us. Rav Uri was born, he grew up in Oak Park, Michigan. He went to Yeshiva Oraita. He served in the IDF as a paratrooper, and he and his wife have the privilege and distinction of being the founding JLIC couple at the University of Michigan. Rav Uri is also a coach for early stage startup or something like that. Maybe I should have added an S after startup, but he can correct me later. Also, I had the privilege of actually visiting his community a couple of years ago, University of Michigan, and it was really, really wonderful, and I had a great time. But one thing that was a little strange was that I came in February, it was 16 degrees outside, and Rav Uri made me walk with him to 7-Eleven to get Slurpees. So Rav Uri, what is with you and Slurpees in the middle of the winter?
Oh my gosh, I have two thoughts on this. One is I can't believe you guys say that every time. I could have sworn it was recorded because you are so good and you have the same tone. I can't believe it. The timing, the tone, you guys are built for this. So I just got to get that out there. That's number one.
You're such a good coach, Uri.
That's not what coaching is, but
okay. All right, we should talk about
that. I appreciate the plug. I appreciate the plug. Yeah, I've always had, so my older brother, he's 10 years older than me. So when you have an older brother that's 10 years older than you, you tend to take a lot, whether you like it or not, from them. And as you go through your life, you filter out, which paradigms you want to continue taking with you and which ones you're ready to leave behind. But the best thing I ever got from my brother was love for Slurpees. He would get a Slurpee in any weather. And when I was a kid, we would go out and get those extremely unhealthy to the point of, I don't know how they sell them, like full gallon Slurpee cups. Whether that was like the middle of the winter, I was the kid going to 7-Eleven and completely unethically making a bad name, bringing those like giant gallons for 7-Eleven day. Like I have always had a deep love for Slurpees, and it's kind of the cold really does it for me. Like at the end of a long day, if I'm a little stressed out, the Slurpee is always going to hit hard. So I try to lay off them more as an adult, but the weather is not a deterrent to me.
Sorry, and I hope the Slurpees will continue to be a factor in the story. But tell us, how did you come to JLIC? What drew you to it, and what got you started?
So that's a great question. I actually never planned on being a JLIC director, and I say that with all honesty. A lot of JLIC directors say, I was never going to go into rabbinics. I was never going to do JLIC, but that truly wasn't my path. When I went to Yeshiva, I had planned on going for just 1 year before returning to the States. I kind of went on this choose your own adventure journey where I ended up in Yeshiva for another year. I did the Army for 1 year and 8 months. I was actually going to continue with the Army. I wanted to be a Katzin, an officer in the IDF. I had an injury which forced me out. And the only place that was willing to take me was Yeshiva. I wanted to start college. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to go back. But I went back to Yeshiva that 4th year, and I had a fundamentally different experience that I had the first year because I had already learned for 1 year. And then I saw where I succeeded and failed to integrate that same learning into my life. And going back into that environment without any of my friends, without any of the excitement, really gave me the foundations to just learn in a way that would translate to how I live. And I learned different Torah. I learned the same Torah from a different lens. And I really fell in love with Torah in a much deeper way. And I ended up in Yeshiva for another year. I was actually supposed to start college at the end of that year. 2 weeks before, I was inspired by a Rebbe, just watching him live his life. And I said to myself, how could I not spend another year in Yeshiva at this juncture of my life? This is the last point. And I had the degree signed up. I was all ready to go. I said, no way. And I went to an all-Israeli yeshiva called Ramat Gan. I was one of 3 English speakers. I was in a shir that was levels above anything that I was capable of. And I had the most phenomenal experience. And while I was there, I also learned that I love teaching. I love sharing. I've always loved community building. I was actually in a JLIC community as a student when I was a lone soldier with Rabbi Josh and Margot Botwinick of Herzliya. and I was a student leader in their community, and I loved everything about them and what they were doing. When we moved to Givat Shmuel, we got involved with the Wogelenters, Tzvi and Tali, in the community that they were building, and we would do a lot of volunteer initiatives. And I was sharing Torah, teaching Torah, going early to help set up, running community events. And Tzvi came up to me one Friday night, and he said, "Hey, here's this lady, Talatia. You should talk to her." I was like, "Okay, like why?" He's like, "Just talk to her. Trust me." Right? I know you. For everyone listening, you just had Talatia last week. See last week's episode with Talatia, our fearless leader. But Tal and I walked home on Friday night with Tzvi. He lives just down the road from me. And we started talking about JLIC. And, I said, like, okay, like, that's like a really cute idea. Like, I like that. Maybe in like a couple of years, maybe it's something that I would do. It wasn't really a serious thought. It was very locked in on my next step as academic. I'm going on a 7-year PhD path in organizational psychology. I'm not even thinking about this kind of work. And I got excited about it. I said, like, why don't we just talk again? And we ended up talking again. Tal came to our apartment on Motzei Shabbat with me and Abby. We had the most amazing conversation. She's probably there for like 2 hours, just connected. And we were really sold on this idea, like, what if we did JLIC? It would be the craziest thing in the world, but let's let it sit. Like, let bachelor's first, take a couple years. We're not rushing to anything. We're not sure if this is right for us. Let's just let it sit. 2 weeks later, Rabbi Tzvi Wogelenter called us and he said, "We want you to be the assistant couple in Givat Shmuel." And our immediate reaction was, absolutely not. Like, you have the wrong person. And he said to me, and I still remember this, he said, "Every good rabbi doesn't want to be a rabbi." And I said to him, "Yeah, but that's when we're talking about a rabbi who like doesn't really believe in themselves or has some sort of fear about being a rabbi, but actually like wants to be a rabbi." I was like, "I actually don't want to be a rabbi. Like, you have got the wrong person." And he's like, "You should think about it." And I said, "Okay, but I'm not going to think about it." But I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't sleep at night for a couple of weeks. Just this idea of how amazing would it be to be a part of a JLIC community. And I decided to change the trajectory of my career and of my life and do JLIC alongside with what I was currently doing. I actually started as possibly the youngest JLIC director, starting Bar Ilan as a student while being the assistant couple to the Wogelenters at Bar Ilan. And what we were expecting at the time was this is going to be a 2-year gig, something that we do, nice community building. We didn't expect to fall in love with it, and we never expected to be in Michigan. But at the end of the year, it kind of came through the grapevine. We were talking to Rabbi Ross, executive director of JLIC, about the campus at Michigan. And now I'm from Michigan. So I have so much family. My grandfather went to U of M. He actually dropped out after 1 year, started a business. But like, he went here. He was in the same frats, that like fraternities that a lot of students that I connect with are in. Michigan was a big part of his life. Like, I grew up watching Michigan football games. My cousins went to Michigan. I had all my friends from high school went to Michigan. And one of their greatest struggles while they were here was that they didn't have a JLIC director. They had a strong community of people who wanted to learn, people who wanted to daven. They didn't have that infrastructure and that family support, that backbone who could just tie it all together and help them. And JLIC was actually prepared to open a campus at Michigan. And for the first time in 4 years, they had the capacity to do it. And they didn't have a person. And it was already July. I think it was July at the time. And Rabbi Ross said to us, almost jokingly, like, "Oh, you're from Michigan. You guys should go to Michigan." And the same thing happened. He said, "Absolutely not. Ha, ha, ha. So funny." Couldn't sleep for a week. Said to ourselves, what if we just picked up our lives, went to Michigan, and we're the JLIC couple? I was learning for smicha at the time, more of a personal pursuit than seeing it as a rabbinic step. But we just had this amazing idea. What if we just take 2 or 3 years and we go be the first be the first JLIC couple at the University of Michigan, get to do something incredible, both in terms of giving to the Jewish community and in terms of receiving from ourselves, which we found has been so true. And it was a little bit more of an unconventional path to get to JLIC than most people, but it's been the best thing to ever happen to us. I've had the most phenomenal 3 years at Michigan, and we're actually just wrapping up now and going back to Israel next year. But sorry, I riffed for a little bit, but that is my unconventional JLIC story.
It's such an extraordinary story. And let's just point out, in addition to what it says about you and Abby, extraordinary JLIC success story on so many levels. We pulled you in and wouldn't let you go, and that's the best way for these things to work. Uri, I wanted to pick up on one note you put out there, which was at least at that early stage, you were saying, look, it's not just that, like, I am a rabbi who wants to be a rabbi who's just feeling a little humble right now. Like, this is just not me at all. And, like, you've got the wrong guy. And I'd love to hear, because from what I can see, it's clear you have in fact been incredibly successful. And I'd love to know like what that continues or hasn't continued to mean to you in your own life and doing this work, and what it's felt like bringing that state of being into your work with your students.
Alex, I love the question.
That's what I'm here for. That's the whole
Yeah,
thing.
it is what you're here for. And you guys are great at this. But it's interesting that you say that because, so the first person who thought I should be a rabbi was my mom. My mom always used to say to me, there was this rabbi who came to our community once. He was very young and energetic, and he really reminds me of you. Like, I was involved in Jewish nonprofit work from a young age. I was, VP of NCSY, and I was student president of Yachad, and I did Bnei Akiva Sniff, which means that really the girls I work with deserved all the credit. They did Bnei Akiva Sniff. I showed up and didn't really do anything, but it was a great experience. Funny today is some of those kids who were in that Bnei Akiva Sniff actually, when they were in 4th grade, actually just came to visit U of M. It was a very full circle experience. But my mom always thought I should be a rabbi. And when I stepped into Yeshiva, Rabbi David Aaron, Rosh Yeshiva of Oraita, one day he just called me into his office and he said, Uri, you should really be a rabbi. And I was like, no, that's really not me. But I'll tell you why I think that they thought that. And I'll tell you why I think that they're right. And why there's a caveat at the end is that ultimately the reason that I'm interested in organizational psychology, because I think that Judaism needs to be something that's not just learned, but lived. Organizational psychology, I wouldn't tell this to a business that I'm working with, but I think of it more as organizational tshuva. It's the process of returning to a deeper sense of self and core values. It's the process of creating a space and fostering an environment where people can thrive, where people can connect to each other, where people are empowered to work together in alignment. And that's also the process of, as Rav Kook says, tshuva is 1% growth. It's the constantly 1% growth towards something. And what is that something? It's returning to yourself. It's not creating something external to yourself. And I think that ultimately that's what Torah is. And the way that I experienced Torah always was that it was something that happened inside the Beit Midrash as an intellectual, spiritual pursuit, but actually wasn't so integrated into my life. You have halacha, which would integrate very well. You have this deep philosophical idea of these beautiful, Hasidic ideas of Torah, which you connect to so well. And then you have halacha, which you take with you into your life. But I actually felt there was always something different. I felt that besides for just living a halachic life, there's actually a way to take what we learn and make it into a tangible, lived reality through the paradigm in which we see the world. And that was always something that was a mission of mine. And I always felt like I was able to translate those two worlds well, which is why I've always been interested in organizational psychology, because there's some people who can teach a high-level Gemara shiur and feel alive and give the best Gemara shiur. I can give a Gemara shiur. I can't give the best Gemara shiur, but I do feel like my unique ability is to translate what happens in the base, what happens in the sefer, and then take that into the actual measurable steps in your day-to-day life. And how do you build a life that's built around Torah? And that was something that I was always trying to do in my own life, and something that I really saw myself doing professionally. So I actually always have wanted to be a rabbi. I just didn't necessarily want to be a rabbi in the Beit Midrash. And there's a lot of aspects of being a community rabbi that's right for me. I say it to Abby sometimes. It's kind of like dating. And I have a Rebbe who I take so much from. And what he would always say to me is, Uri, you can have the right girl, multiple basharets, different people that you can go with, but you have to think carefully when you're dating someone, not just how this feels right now, but where this is taking me in 20 years. And is this turning me into the person that I want to be? Is this the best use of my kochot, the best use of my abilities? And he would say that you can date someone who you have this amazing relationship and it's bringing out these beautiful parts of you, but there's something there that it's not fully it. And you should be careful to look for that. Understanding, obviously you could have an amazing relationship, understanding not just what the relationship is right now, but where it's taking you. And I feel very much that way about rabbinic work. I could get married to rabbinic work. I love it. It's amazing. It's incredible. We've been dating for years. It's been an amazing experience. It's such a core part of who I am, but there's something, just some little something that's missing, some potential that I feel like I can bring out of myself, some mission that I think that Hashem has for me in the world that I'm trying to do. And I think that if I stayed in the Beit Midrash as a rabbinic leader, I wouldn't do as good of a job as the person whose mission it is to do that. And I wouldn't be doing a service to myself as the person who I believe I am, whose mission is to try to take that and translate that into the day-to-day world.
Can you tell us what it is you're doing next and how that maybe better reflects the potential or the mission that God has in mind for you?
First of all, it's funny to say because no one ever truly knows the mission that God has for them. And I actually think that the biggest mistake that people make, including myself, is thinking that this is it, right? Like as you get older, there's this amazing line in the book, as we get older, we just discover that we were less wrong, but we don't usually get more right. So I'm very open to my mission being different in the world. But where I feel my energy is most drawn to right now and where I feel like I can actually be most effective is I look at Israeli startup companies and founders, and I see a lot of Olim who enter these companies and struggle. They struggle because the army mentality, the Rosh Lakir, the head to the wall attitude of building an Israeli startup works really well in the army, but it doesn't actually work well in motivating people and communicating trust and being able to delegate to your team and building healthy relationships. And startup founders ultimately struggle with the same things that every single student of mine struggles with and that I struggle with myself. And that's, how do I take the ideal picture of how I'd like to live and now integrate that into my day-to-day life? And how do I manage myself in a way that creates a life that's not bottom up, driven by the most urgent priorities, driven by any sort of desire for status or worth, but create a life that actually reflects top down what I believe in and what I want to see. And that's ultimately the challenge that every student faces when they come onto a campus, coming post yeshiva on a JLIC campus, is they've had this amazing experience in yeshiva. They've been learning for a year, some of them 2 years. They feel incredibly fired up. They have this ideal picture of how they'd like their life to look and like to play out from a spiritual perspective. And what they find, and what I found myself, is that it's actually very hard to translate that exactly into a college life. Learning in yeshiva and being in college are completely different. And if you don't know how to actually take that skill set, those ideals, and make them into reality, you struggle a lot. And I've loved working with college students as they seek support and look for guidance on how they themselves can live lives that are aligned with their values and continue to stay connected to Torah and continue to grow, because it's a genuine want that I see so much on campus. I don't seek people out and tell them, hey, like, I think you should learn. You have people who are sitting here struggling and saying, I love to learn. And I had such an amazing experience in yeshiva, and I'm struggling because I don't have time. And what does it mean to live a Torah life outside of yeshiva? In the same sense, what I help founders with is very similar. We build a company that has foundations and a personal life that creates the emotional, spiritual, psychological side of running a business, the mental fortitude, the top-down thinking, the values, the leading of your own life and being effective instead of being affected. And I think that's a big one for JLIC students too. As you walk onto a college campus, it's very easy to be an affected person. There is so much happening on a college campus that can draw your energy and attention, and it's very hard to stay in control of the life you want to lead. There's a massive amount of peer pressure, both from the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community. There's so many different opinions, and it's a little bit of a blitz. And while there's a beautiful thing in understanding the nuance and self-discovery, it's very important that while you take those steps, it's a top-down process that you're making decisions and not just being pulled by what's happening to you. And ultimately, what I try to communicate to my students is that you need to be effective people and effective Jews. And effective means that you're making top-down decisions about how you live your life, and you're in control of where you're going. And what I do with founders is very similar. It's, you start a company, there's a massive blitz of priorities, a need to rapidly upskill in communication and self-management and time management. There's so many urgent fears, lack of belief in yourself, and you're really just trying to get this thing off the ground. And what you need to do is stay effective. You need to stay effective and not affected, because the second you're affected is the second that somebody else decides what your life looks like. And when you're effective is when I think you can actually integrate what you want to see into what you experience.
Can you tell us more a little bit about how you help your students, or how you think that a Torah Jew can be more of an effective Torah Jew?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you guys a story. I was thinking about this before we came on, is when I was, I suppose, my student's age, 21, in the Army, I was struggling with a question. On one hand, I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to be a katzid. I wanted to be the best soldier that I could possibly be. On the other hand, I wanted to be a Torah Jew. Coming out of the Beit Midrash, you hear, Asay Toratcha Keva, like make your Torah Keva. You always have to be learning. And a lot of my friends were spending so much time learning in the Army that I thought, and maybe wrongly, that they weren't effective soldiers that they could have been. And that was a struggle that I grappled with myself. I said, where does my priorities lie? I'm in the Army. I want to be a Talmud Chacham, but I also want to be a Katzin. What does Hashem want from me? And I called my Rebbe at the time, Rabbi Avner Sheshar. If you haven't heard of him, he is the most amazing, wonderful, sweet person. And you probably haven't heard of him because he's also one of the most humble human beings I've ever met, unless you're in his shir room. It's funny, in the Beit Midrash and the Kotel, I believe he was actually asked to be the Rosh Yeshiva once, the story goes. but he prefers sitting in his quiet corner with a big, beautiful smile on his face and just supporting students and being there with them. And he is a fountain of wisdom and truth. And he looks into your eyes and you just start crying because he's looking at you. And it's amazing to talk to somebody who looks at you. Not many people are really looking at you when they look at you, and Rav Sheshar looks at you. And he quickly became my Rebbe. He used to give a shiur on Rav Kook, and I didn't even understand Hebrew at the time. I was learning Hebrew, but I would sit in his shiur every morning from 9 to 9:30, and I would bawl my eyes out. And maybe it was because I was youthful, idealistic, and in a process of being lost and finding myself. But I truly think that the Torah he shared and the way he shared it was so genuine and authentic. It communicated beyond words. I've never, ever spoken to someone with so much conviction in my entire life. And there's different ways to share Torah. There's passivity, in the sense that like, hey, I'm sharing this. Do you want it? There's aggression, which is like, hey, you must have this. And then there's conviction, where I truly believe in something myself and I'm going to share it because I feel like it needs to be shared. And it's not about me. I'm sharing this because I feel like it needs to be shared. And that was the way Rav Sheshar shared Torah. And it just spoke to my soul in a way that no Torah ever has before. But then you'd walk into his shiur room. He'd come right to your face and he'd ask you if you understood Tosfos. If you didn't understand Tosfos, you would throw your desk across the room. And I'm not exaggerating. And he's probably like in his late 70s and his early 80s, but he was so passionate about getting to the truth of Torah and uplifting you while he did it. I've never met someone who could be so gentle with you and so firm at the same time. And that was a little bit of a tangent. I was just thinking about him. He's the most amazing human being, and I think we should all aspire to be like him. But I called him up and I said, Rav Sheshar, I'm really struggling. And I didn't say it like that. I said it in really broken Hebrew that made me sound like the silly, smiling American that I was at the time. I said, Rav Sheshar, I'm really struggling. I'm not sure what to do. What does Hashem want from me? And what he said to me is, Uri, you have the ratzon to be the best chayal you can be. You are in the army of Hashem. You need to be the best soldier that you can be. And you need to change how you think about making Torah keva. And this is an insight that I heard originally from him. I've seen bits of it in the Sfas Emes. I've seen a lot of it through the writing of Rav Kook, but this is a Torah from Rav Avner Sheshar. And what he said to me is that you shouldn't be thinking about how much Torah you're learning, but about what Torah you're learning and how that's seeping into your life and affecting who you are. So right now, your job is to be the best commander that you can be. I was in course Mefakdim at the time. I was in commander's course. I really wanted to graduate at the top of my class to get new trainees. It was a dream of mine. And I felt like if I took my foot off the gas, then I wasn't going to be able to accomplish that. And he said, that is your goal. That is what Am Yisrael needs of you right now. You need to do that. But that doesn't mean you can forget the Torah that you're learning. You just have to change the way that you approach it. Instead of thinking about Torah as something that I do as a morning seder every day, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, learn something that you love that actually translates into who you are, and then live your life, seeing your life through the lens and the paradigm of Torah. Live a Torah lived life. And he said to me, you will get back to the base. And I know that about, and he was right. And I thought he was wrong. He said, you will get back to the base. And I know that about you because you miss it so much and it's so hard for you. And you'll have moments in your life where you're able to have these deep moments of strengthening your own commitment and conviction in what you do. You'll be able to have that morning seder again. You'll be able to have that amazing shiur. But in the meantime, you're in asiyah. You're in the world of doing. And you need to do. And that doing should be shaped by the Torah that you learn. It shouldn't be separated from it. And that was an insight which changed my life because it changed the way that I live, that I learned Torah. I shifted. I used to learn in my own Seder. I used to learn a lot of Gemara and nothing else. And I still like to learn Gemara in my own Seder. But what I realized is that there's actually parts of Torah that directly communicate in a more emotional way that seeps from al levavecha to bil levavecha, on your heart to in your heart, that actually affect how I see the world. And I picked up a lot of different books on Rav Kook, on Rabbi Nachman, on all these different Hasidic books that at one point I was like, oh, these are fluffy, they're not intellectual, they're not making me be a Talmud Chacham. And I realized that they're making me live a Torah life. And that was a massive shift for me. And what I communicate to my students ultimately when they come to campus, a lot of them are in 0 to 100 thinking. So 0 to 100 thinking means I'm in Yeshiva and I was 100. So now I'm in college and I'm in 0 in terms of learning. So I have to continue that 100. And that's just not a way to live. Because every student who has been in a secular college, and you can debate, is that the right decision? Is that the wrong decision? I think that there's a lot of value to gain from being in a secular college. I think there's a lot of value to gain for being in YU. But every student who is in a secular college who tries to be in yeshiva has very much struggled and failed because there's a fundamental incongruence between the life that you're leading and the life that you want to live. And when you try to do that, I've noted in the last couple of years, I've noticed is that the people who try to go 0 to 100 usually burn out and fail. And what they end up saying is that the yeshiva experience wasn't real. The Torah that I learned wasn't really it. my rebbeim weren't really it. And, my experience in college is real life. And now I'm mature and I see things differently. And I think they're completely wrong. I think that they touched something real. The way I see it is like this. You were in an ocean. It was a real ocean. You were on a lifeboat. That lifeboat is full of air. You got to ride the ocean, but you were on a lifeboat. When you come to college, the lifeboat pops. And now you have a question. You could either say I wasn't on the ocean, or you could say I was on the ocean, but I was in a lifeboat, and how am I going to build a real boat? And that real boat is actually a very different boat than the lifeboat you were sailing in college. It's built off of taking Torah, Judaism, and principles and turning it into the soul of who you are, of embedding them deeply into your character, of seeing your entire life and not just your experiences of Beit Midrash as a manifestation of your relationship to Hashem, as an expression of your soul, of your Chelek Elokai Mimal. It's such a powerful and deep thing. And what I try to communicate with my students is, how do we build the tools to live a Torah life? Because you're not in the base right now. And we can be. We can have our morning Seder on Sunday. We can have our pirkei and pancakes on Friday. We can have our shir on Wednesday night. But if you want to succeed as a Torah Jew, you need to learn how to live with Torah when the sefer is closed. And I always tell my students that after every chavrusa. Close the book, now the learning starts. This was a time to tap in and to go into this space, which exists separately than your day-to-day life. But now that the book is closed, this is when the learning starts. Are you thinking about it? Are you making decisions based off it? Are you living a top-down life? And to me, that's been everything. And in my own life, that's how I've stayed very connected in my relationship with Hashem and my relationship to myself. And I've seen so many students benefit from that way of thinking as well. It's been a very powerful insight that I'm very grateful to Rav Sheshar for sharing with me. And I'm sure there's people out there who are going to hear this and say, no, you should be learning, Daf Yomi every day and going into Gemara. And I think that they're right. I think that they're right. And you should be learning Torah as an intellectual and spiritual pursuit. But Torah is meant to be lived, not just learned. There's two parts of Torah. One is learning and one is living. And I actually think that they're not two parts. They're not separate. They're one part that exists within a circle. Learning and living Torah, learning and doing, exist within a bubble of living a life of Torah. And if you don't have both of those together, I think that you're misunderstanding what Hashem wants from you, what Judaism wants from your life, and how to approach this. And for so many people, Torah has become an intellectual pursuit. It's about, can I slug you up better on a Tosfos? Do I understand this Rashi better than you? Can I pull out this Rambam that you've never heard of so that I look smart and you don't feel great about yourself? And that's not what Torah is meant to be. Torah is meant to be a life, and it's meant to be a life that we share, a life that's meant to interconnect us, a life that's meant to uplift all of us individually and as a society.
Uri, all of this has made me really poignantly sad that the students at the University of Michigan are going to be missing you next year. But I'm so grateful they've had these few years, and I'm so grateful we got about a half an hour of your time. Been extraordinarily enriching.
This is an amazing platform, what you guys are doing for Am Yisrael. There's so many incredible, if there's one experience that I've gotten from JLIC that's been enriching to me, it's been the other directors. I started, I think I was the youngest director. I was the youngest director at the time, and all I had, I'm a sponge and I absorb, and everybody's taught me something different. Alex Ozar, Don Cantor have just been beacons of light for anything that we do at Michigan, and it's amazing that you're highlighting that so many people can see it. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Uri, and Hatzlacha with everything going forward. We are sure you'll stay a part of the family.
Amen.
Don't be a stranger.
I'm not going to be a stranger, and I'm telling you, you'll catch me. If you let me one more thought, at the JLIC conference, I had this wild experience with a JLIC director who I have never been so connected with, but somebody I've always looked up to, and I'm not going to say his name in case it's embarrassing for him. But he asked me what I'm doing next year, and I said, I told him what I'm doing. I said, I've been coaching with startup founders, and I'm on a little bit of a different trajectory. He said, oh, really? I'm so surprised that you're not staying in rabbinics. And I said, yeah. He's like, but you're at least going to give a shir, right? I said, no. I said, probably not. He said, you have to commit right now that you're going to give a shir. And I said, who is this guy? Like, he doesn't know me, but I've been the same, not being able to sleep at night. I haven't been able to sleep at night thinking that, I'm going to give a shir. And I'm actually really excited. It's been amazing to be a part of JLIC and be my official role capacity sharing Torah. But in the same way that we've spoken about with Torah being, your authentic truth and really needing to share, I'm actually really excited to continue to share Torah outside the framework of JLIC. And I think that there's a very high chance that if you show up to a random WeWork in Tel Aviv next year, we'll be doing a lunch and learn on my budget to anybody who wants to come. No organization, just Torah, living Torah, and trying my best to share what I've picked up.
Amazing.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Uri.
Thank you, guys.